Odds ratio of research. The odds ratio measures the strength of association between an exposure and an outcome. It compares the odds of an event occurring in an exposed group to the odds of it occurring in an unexposed group. Step 1. Set up a 2 by 2 contingency table. To calculate the odds ratio, organize your data into a standard for cell table. This table shows the outcome in exposed and unexposed cases. Step 2. Calculate the formula. The mathematical formula for the odds ratio is: odds ratio is equal to odds of outcome in exposed cases divided by odds of outcome in unexposed cases. Step 3. Interpret your results. There are 3 interpretations from odds ratio. If odds ratio is equal to 1, then there is no association between exposure and outcome. If odds ratio is more than 1, then the exposure is associated with higher odds of the outcome. For example, odds ratio of 2 means the odds are doubled. If odds ratio is less than 1, then the exposure is associated with lower odds of the outcome, so the exposure is a protective factor. For what study design is the odds ratio used? The odds ratio is used for specific study designs, and it is the mandatory metric for one in particular, because relative risk cannot be calculated. Case control studies. This is the primary home of the odds ratio. Because these studies select participants based on their outcome status, for example, matching a group of sick people with a group of healthy people, rather than following them over time. You cannot calculate absolute risk or relative risk. The odds ratio is used instead. Why odds ratio in this study? You start with the outcome, for example, 100 people with a disease and 100 without, and look backward at exposure history. Reason for using odds ratio is, because you dictate the number of sick people in the study, you cannot calculate the true mathematical risk or incidence. You must use the odds ratio here. Second study is cross-sectional studies. Researchers use odds ratio here to analyze data from a population at a single specific point in time, to find links between exposures and outcomes. Why odds ratio in this study? You measure exposure and outcome at the exact same point in time. For example, a one-time community survey. Reason for using odds ratio is, you do not follow people over time to see who develops a condition. So you use the odds ratio to find links between variables. Last study is cohort studies with logistic regression. While relative risk is preferred for cohort studies, researchers use odds ratios here when performing complex statistical modeling, like logistic regression, to control for confounding variables. Why odds ratio in this study? You follow a group over time to see who gets sick, where relative risk is usually preferred. Reason for using odds ratio is, researchers switch to the odds ratio in cohort studies when they need to run a mathematical model called logistic regression to adjust for confounding factors like age or smoking status.